Hey guys, what's up? Have you ever wondered why I rarely or never talk about certain RPGs? Now I did try getting into some of them, I did my best, I tried several games, and after several attempts, I realized I just couldn't get into them. So these are 10 JRPG series I just can't get into. Alright, let's begin! Number 10. Pokemon. Pokemon, or pretty much any other monster collecting game like Monster Rancher or Yokai Watch, are series I can't get into. I tried. The idea itself never really sounded interesting to me, but out of curiosity, I played some of them, especially Pokemon games. My problems are, first, I didn't grow up with these types of anime shows or video games, so I never really cared for them. I find zero appeal in collecting cute little monsters and training them. Second, stories are always childish and therefore boring to me. If I had grown up with them, maybe I would have some nostalgia, but then again, I didn't, so I don't. A story is the most compelling aspect to me in an RPG, even if it's a little weeb with fan service. Pokemon has this charm to it that I clearly see, but that I truly can't fathom for some reason. At least I understand the appeal to other people, but if the main focus is to gather cute monsters and train them, then it's not for me. Which leads me to my next series. Number 9. Digimon. They're very similar, sure, Digimon is the only true competition Pokemon actually has, so I did mention that I don't care about monster training, right? And don't throw at me the Megami Tensei series, as they do not focus on this and have strong stories and character development, plus they're dark as hell, the way I like them. Digimon doesn't fit that description whatsoever. It's somewhat different than Pokemon actually, which is why I gave it its own spot on the list. I've played several of them, and most entries do feel diverse amongst each other, unlike Pokemon, which is the same over and over again. However, at the end of the day, they do revolve around collecting creatures, training them, and having them fight. Even the Cyber Sleuth games you guys recommended to me a lot of times are no exception. Sorry I tried getting into them, but I just couldn't. Number 8. Kingdom Hearts. The first Kingdom Hearts game I ever played was 2. I enjoyed it and beat it. I didn't fall in love with it, of course, but I liked it enough to look out for the other titles. So I got my hands on the first game. However, I lost interest halfway through the game. Then I played 358 days and a half because I had liked Roxas in Kingdom Hearts 2. A few hours later, I lost interest once again. I thought I'd give up after playing Chain of Memories on the Game Boy Advance, but I understood it was vastly different than the others. The last straw, however, was Birth by Sleep on the PSP, which is the prequel to them all. A few hours later, I was dozing off. I grew up with Disney as a kid, and I grew up with Final Fantasy as an adult, but the combination of both, under the writing creativity of this guy, was something I simply couldn't enjoy. That and the fact that the battle mechanics always felt clunky to me for some reason, I just can't get into them. Number 7. Soulsborne. I've played every single Soulsborne game out there except Dark Souls 3. I couldn't get into any of them. I found Bloodborne to be the best because it's gothic, it's darker, it has more horror and way more personality. Man, that game is badass. But I lost interest along the way again. Sure, the difficulty is an issue for me, but I would put up with it if there was at least a good story and character development to keep me invested. Which leads me to Sekiro, a game that did have those characteristics. However, I never went back to it because by the time I played it, I had already convinced myself that these games were no good for me. Maybe one day I'll give it a second chance? But the other Souls games out there, including Bloodborne, nope. Even if they were easy or less challenging, I will still stay away from them. Number 6. Rune Factory. I remember playing Harvest Moon on the Super Nintendo and then one on the PlayStation 2. Didn't like either. I see why people love them because the mechanics can be addictive for some. Not for me. So obviously I couldn't get into the Rune Factory series. They do feel like true role-playing games though, and are action-oriented. I played one on the Nintendo DS and thought the controls were sluggish, but it was alright I guess. My favorite was Tides of Destiny on the PS3 and the Wii. I thought the action and controls were great, but it's the farming simulation that turns me off. I like the Atelier games for example because farming and gathering doesn't take too long. In Rune Factory, this is a major part of the gameplay, which is why I always find it tedious and unappealing. I mean, I can see why people love them as well as some of the other series in this list, but this is just yet another series that is not for me. Number 5. Advance Wars. I'm a sucker for strategy RPGs, right? Not one for Advance Wars though. I don't find it interesting to control a bunch of miniature generic soldiers and tanks that look exactly the same. In fact, I don't care at all about tanks. Thank goodness there's only 1 or 2 in every Valkyria Chronicles game. So the micromanagement involving the armies is therefore much less attractive for me. Now, the stories are solid here, but the characters are mostly a joke and they're hard to take seriously. I played the first one on the Game Boy Advance and then one on the Nintendo DS. My experience was identical. Played a couple of hours and almost had a headache, because I was trying my best to get into them, considering I love the genre, and I also love Fire Emblem. Intelligent Systems, the developers of Fire Emblem, also worked on these games. But in the end, I couldn't. They're way too different from what I was expecting at the beginning. If only the commanders were actual characters in the game and not these generic looking soldiers and tanks and whatever. If only. Number 4. Monster Hunter. By this point, you've already realized I'm a story-driven guy. So most of these quest-driven games that are 90% gameplay, 10% story are just not my jam. Add the fact that Monster Hunter feels like all of them should have been MMORPGs. I'd probably get more enjoyment out of them if I could play them with somebody else, but I rarely play online. Even if they had a local co-op mode, I still would lose interest, because honestly, if the entire game is going around to hunt the big dinosaur type of monsters and grinding just with that goal in mind, I'm sorry, I just don't see any fun in that. If you love them, that's cool, more power to you. Don't let this video hinder your enjoyment of Monster Hunter or any other RPG series I've talked about so far. I'm just here to explain why I can't get into them, even though I did try. One that I kinda liked was Monster Hunter Generations on the 3DS, but then again I got to a point where I was playing a game that just wasn't for me. Number 3. Hyperdimension Neptunia. You've probably seen me streaming a lot of Compile Hard Games, the company who makes the Neptunia series. They are similar in terms of battle mechanics, graphics, and comedic stupidity. I've enjoyed my fair share of them, but I wouldn't call myself a big fan. Truth is, none of them are top tier games. None. I did get into some of them, but not into any of the Neptunia games. Why? Because the others have usually more adult characters, better gameplay, slightly different ideas. I find the jokes in them somewhat funnier, and there's also a type of charisma that I like in them. In the Neptunia games, however, barely anything makes me laugh. It's interesting that each girl represents a certain console or company, but I don't find any of them likable, to be honest. Battles are cool in most of them, but the navigation, the menus, the gameplay itself, man, pretty much the flow of the plot is very boring. That's just my opinion though. Number 2. Mario and Luigi. I'm a huge Super Mario RPG fan. I also like the first 2 Paper Mario games. But when I played the Superstar Saga on the Game Boy Advance, I was confused. Then I noticed it wasn't the same developers. That explained why they felt so different. I find it tedious having one character assigned to each button during platforming or puzzle solving. I get distracted often and lose focus, so it's annoying for me to play like this. And the battle system feels like a watered down version of the original Super Mario RPG. You still control Mario and Luigi with one button, but that's it. And there are no other characters joining your party like in the other Mario RPG games. That's what I always liked about them. So I tried Bowser's Inside Story on the Nintendo DS, and it was definitely better, but somewhere along the way I also lost interest, precisely because I had the same complaints. Mario and Luigi, great series, just not for me. And well, I guess it's very sad that we won't see them anytime soon, ever again, because the company is defunct. Number 1. Adrian Odyssey. Despite the fact that I think the music by Yuzo Koshiro is amazing, I don't like these games one bit. For starters, I thought the stories and characters were alright, but somewhat uninteresting. People play these games for their gameplay mechanics, I noticed. They're all dungeon crawlers in first person and you gotta draw a map in the second screen all the time. I see absolutely zero fun in that. I put up with Persona Q, which is influenced by them because it's friggin' Persona. I love Persona. But Adrian Odyssey is just Adrian Odyssey, and I lost interest since the very first game I ever played. Forget about the fact that they're very challenging, especially if you run into those FOE strong monsters. My biggest gripe is that I don't care about these characters at all. I don't care for drawing a map, and I dislike playing games on first person, getting lost all the time because I have a terrible sense of direction. And between all of that, frequent random encounters. Yeah, no. You know what, I could go on with many other series, so let's just call them honorable mentions, like the Yu-Gi-Oh games, man. They're strategy RPGs and I just can't get into them. I don't like Yu-Gi-Oh in real life. What about the Kingsfield series? They are very boring games in my opinion. First person dungeon crawlers, action RPGs, slow as hell, brutally hard. Yakuza, maybe? Yakuza Like a Dragon was fun, but I just don't find it appealing playing with drug dealers. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!